Hello, everybody. I'm Jazz Franklin, a filmmaker based in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I'm happy to welcome you to Framing a Revolution Art and Protest panel. I'm here moderating the panel on behalf of Patois. Patois is a New Orleans International Film Festival. It premieres here in New Orleans every year. We have a yearly programming and a yearly film festival. And I can tell you a little bit about Patois. Patois is a film festival dedicated to nurturing the city's human rights community by creating platforms to show work of local organizers and organizations, specifically organizations involved in the struggle for human rights. We provide a forum for local and international issues. You can find out more about us and any upcoming events at patoisfilmfest.org or on our Instagram, Patois Film Fest, and also Facebook, Patois Film Fest. That's PATOIS Film Fest. Now that that's out of the way, I'm incredibly honored to be hosting this panel with two amazing filmmakers, Ashley O'Shea and Seth Hernandez Ronquillo. Am I saying that correctly? All right, so I will just go ahead and introduce you all, and then we'll just jump into some questions. Does that feel all right for folks?
Yep. Go
All
for
right.
it.
Cool. Ashley O'Shea is a DP and documentarian based in Chicago, Illinois, whose work focuses on illuminating marginalized voices. She has produced work for national brands including Lifetime, Ford Motor Company, Boost Mobile, KQED, and Dr. Martens. Most recently, she filmed the final episode of Dr. Martens' Tough As You series, starring the band Phony People, accruing over 65,000 views on social media and the web. In 2019, she co-produced the Chicago episode of KQED's award-winning series, If Cities Could Dance, which became one of their most viewed episodes to date. Her work has also appeared in the critically acclaimed Lifetime docuseries, Surviving R. Kelly. It's nice to have you with us, Ashley.
Ooh, that was a long one. Thank you. Need to cut that down.
Seth Hernandez Ronquillo is an undocumented immigrant filmmaker and community organizer whose roots come from Bicol, Philippines. They are the fruit of their parents' sacrifices, their siblings' resilience, and their community's nurturing. Seth envisions a filmmaking landscape that centers equity and abundance, where all artists have resources to thrive using the unique skill sets they embody. Seth's short films have been televised, featured, and awarded in film festivals across the U.S. As a part of the inaugural cohort of the Disruptors Fellowship by 50/50 by 2020 and the Center for Cultural Power, Seth is developing a half-hour TV comedy pilot about the undocumented experience. Seth also directed and produced a short documentary coverage about healthcare expansion for undocumented adults. They served as impact producer for the projects In Plain Sight and the award-winning Call Her Ganda. In 2010, Seth has been organizing around migrant justice issues from education equality to deportation defense. They are also the co-founder of the Undocumented Filmmakers Collective, which tackles the inequalities that undocumented immigrants face in the media industry. They are the recipients of numerous fellowships, including Firelight Impact Producers Lab and the Soros Justice Fellowship. We also had Ephraim Asali, who was supposed to join us, but he had a death in the family, so we're sending him love and our condolences. So welcome to both of you. And I am just going to go ahead and start with the questions. So this is a question for both of the panelists. Currently, race, gender, policing, and immigration are controversial and often polarizing issues in the United States. You know, given the current U.S. elections, this summer's passed mass uprisings against policing and public health care, headed back to the Supreme Court actually this week. Can you each talk a little bit about what motivated you to make these deeply personal stories and how they're being received in this moment right now?
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's unapologetic. In terms of even the political landscape that we're looking at as recent as last week, I'm realizing that a big impetus for this film was to really give an on the ground community perspective of what many, liberal politicians many of their platforms are bolstered by a lot of the work that's happening in our communities. And so, for me, with Unapologetic, it came about at a time when young Black people were organizing around the police killing of young Black woman Rakia Boyd, and were really strategic about how they were using local politics to attempt to get accountability for her killing. And one of the main ways they did that was through these Chicago Police Board hearings. That citizens have a direct forum with this appointed board to talk about all of these sort of issues with policing. And so I was just in that space, and I was really, they shut the meeting down on the first one I attended, and I was really taken aback by the leaders in the space, being Black women and femmes, and identifying in ways that I identify in a lot of ways. So I really want with Unapologetic, I really just wanted to, kind of give that in-depth exploration of the community work that is happening, because that is literally the platform that these politicians run on. Our mayor Lori Lightfoot, she was able to elevate herself to the level of mayor in a lot of ways because of the work of young Black organizers, but then turned around and and discredited them in so many ways. So I just wanted to give voice and visibility to that, because I knew in my own experience that the power was really with the community, and I just felt like there was a lack of that representation in the media landscape at the time.
Mm.
Thank you so much for that, Ashley. I just want to say I've seen Unapologetic twice, and I just have mad love for your film. Also, like Jazz mentioned, I did a Source Justice Fellowship, and I that's how I met Bella
Oh yeah,
originally,
Bella, yeah.
and getting to see Bella applying for the fellowship, and also seeing
Yeah.
Ari there, I was like, wow, like this is like a throwback. So
Small
just
world.
sending mad love
Yeah.
to the amazing work you all are doing. Thank you for the film that you made. In terms of coverage, I've been, before I started with my trajectory in filmmaking, I've been a community organizer since 2010. As an undocumented person, it's inevitable to not be as involved, especially in the circumstances of my life, because everything that's political is affecting my family personally. Um, and often, I think for a lot of directly impacted people, we're sometimes split between, do I pursue my passions in life, or do I pursue, this organizing work, and often there's no room to do both, and I think more recently feeling inspired by the work of a lot of leaders, and just being able to mix both of those experiences together. I originally started in organizing around education equity and deportation defense, but around 2015, I was involved in the Health for All campaign here in California to expand healthcare access for all low-income people, regardless of their immigration status. And in California, if you are low income, there's a program called Medi-Cal, particularly in the state. I think in the national level, it's called Medicare or Medicaid. Medicare, actually, and in California, it's called Medi-Cal. But if you're low income, you should be able to qualify for it. But because of your immigration status, you are excluded from that. And actually, the Affordable Care Act, like you mentioned, Jazz, it's like this very instrumental policy that advanced healthcare access for undocumented people in the United States. But the Affordable Care Act explicitly excludes undocumented immigrants. In the debates, last year, when before when there were like 900 candidates for the Democratic Party, there was a question in one of the first debates. Would you expand healthcare for undocumented people? And I remember Joe Biden being like trying to figure out, oh, everyone raise their hands. Let me raise my hand too, because I would not look cool if I did. Literally, that's how I interpreted the moment, right? And in the conversation around the pandemic, also, there's all this there's this expansion of the services for everyone, but undocumented people who are essential workers in so many ways are excluded from these spaces. With coverage, we actually started filming last year, and we finished the film last year. Little did we know that there would be a pandemic that would be happening this year, and the relevance of the film becomes that much more important, as we highlight a caregiver who is an elderly person herself, but because of her immigration status, she's not able to access the care that she provides for other people. And similarly, another way that we see care is through the policy advocate Hector in the film, whose organizing work literally is another shape of care, for the ways that they show up for the community. So I think for me, being able to amplify the leadership of undocumented people, not just as survivors of the traumas that are often associated with us in mainstream media, that we're like victims of ICE, which is very real. We like are afraid of a lot of things, but beyond that fear, we're also leaders and just amazing human beings, and I think that's often overlooked in the conversation about who even is undocumented.
Word, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think there's something so powerful about y'all's films because you're filling a space that hasn't been filled, the representation of Black queer femmes or aging undocumented folks, and I think that's really powerful work. I wonder if you all could talk about process. So the processes of making your films, they're very different films. Um, and but I think I really dig the cinema verite aspects of your films, and I wonder if Ashley, you could talk about the kind of like being in the street and like these really tense moments where you're in the street with your organizing fam, and then also confronting police or city officials, like these high tense moments, and still like what is that like? And then even like from the street to the cutting room, like what's that process? And the same for you, Set. What's the process of finding your characters and finding that intimacy between that they would let you in to talk about their status and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely left the more chaotic moments out of the film, in terms of camera work, I mean. But yeah, I think I came up through Cartemquin films, and they have always been really steeped in this idea of cinema verite, and that was always what I really connected to when I was learning about documentary as well. So I knew that that was something that was how I wanted to approach this project, and I also just felt, being the main cinematographer on the film as well. Um, One woman banding it a lot of times, I felt like it allowed me to create an intimacy with my characters that wouldn't have been as accessible or easy if I had a full blown crew. Um, which is interesting because, of course, I had the difficulty of just like trying to do everything. But I think honestly, staying nimble in the long run benefited me both with Janae and Bella, and it also benefited me when we were out at protests and direct actions, because I was able to move a lot more freely, in terms of even the interactions that we were having with the police and the other powers that be. The camera a lot of times served as a shield, and even in those moments where things got really tense and, you know, your fight or flight kind of kicks in, I really just tried to stay connected to the camera, to the framing, to what I was looking at, and to just like kind of live in that space and kind of, I really had to often um, have a disembodied mindset to not stop myself from filming. And I also think because I was building these relationships not only with Janae and Bella, but also with the larger, Black organizing community here. People look out for each other. People, you know, they once they understood my good intentions and what I was trying to do, I think they kind of also included me in that hedge of protection, because they don't want to see another young Black person hurt, even if even if they have a camera. So they definitely held me down a lot through that process and um, allowed me to capture the story, very much, in a cinema verite sense that I think, really the intimacy of it, I think, is like the strength of our film because we're able to, go places that a lot of other people, as even as filmmakers, aren't able to because of my identity and the sort of approach that I had. So
Yeah, and for coverage, for me, I try my best to film with people that I already know. I think often in the ways that the stories of undocumented folks are told, you have to be like this, like just superhuman person, who has to. I saw the cat. um, Hello, friend. Yeah, like you have to be this superhuman person to deserve to have your story told, And I think for me, when I think about those that are in my life, every human being and the undocumented folks in my life have so much story in them, And the way I met Emma I was volunteering at the Filipino Worker Center, and one of our associate producers, Tita Mirla Baldonado, who's an organizer at the Filipino Worker Center, was the one that introduced me to Tita Emma. Tita means auntie, by the way, in Tagalog. And that's how we were able to connect, and she was sharing with me the work that she was doing. She's not just a caregiver, a home care worker, but she's also an organizer at the Filipino Workers Center and also a board member of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. So she's just a super badass on top of being a grandma, so she's just like incredible. And Hector, I've known them since I was in college, actually, when I first started organizing in 2010. That's how I first met them, also a longtime mentor in my life, and really being one of the founders, the co-founders of the immigrant health justice movement in California. They've been leading a lot of that work. And when I first got involved in the Health for All campaign in 2015, we got more closer in that work, aside from the organizing within immigrant justice spaces that we've been doing. And for me, Ligaya Romero, another filmmaker, kind of talks about the words of Adrienne Marie Brown, working at the speed of trust. And I think when we film with people who are in more vulnerable situations, and in their life, being able to make sure that they have agency in how their stories are told is something that I'm very mindful about. We actually had a third protagonist originally, but when they shared the cut of the final cut to their attorney, they decided to, their attorney told them it might not be best for your case to move forward with being in this project, because they were adjusting their status, especially with all that the Trump administration has been doing the last 4 years. So ultimately, in the 11th hour, we had to take them out of the project. It was a difficult moment, like very stressful. But I think being able to live with the final film, not just for yourself, but for everyone that's been involved, I think is something that's always important for us filmmakers, especially in documentary nonfiction spaces, to think about.
Word. Thank you. Um, well, I guess I want to ask also, as organizers, since you're both organizers, I'm an organizer as well here in New Orleans. And And I think there's something about sometimes in organizing spaces, there doesn't really seem a lot, there's not really a lot of room for art making. Everyone wants to talk about the material conditions and how we meet those material conditions. And you do art on your own time. And I just wonder where do you see kind of this, your work kind of building a bridge? That's, I see it as like your work merging this art and organizing and activism into kind of one. And I wonder, like, what's that like for you all as you're making your work? Do you see yourself doing that, or does your art inform your politics? How does that work?
I can start. Okay. Um, uh, yeah, I totally resonate with everything that you said, Jazz. Um, I think I remember seeing a post by Patrice Colors at one point where she was talking about how her art saves her life, and being able to integrate that in her movement work is so crucial. um, like I mentioned, I think for directly impacted people, we often have to turn our backs away from our passions in life for me, the way I interpret it is for this idea of the grander good of our communities, right? But I also think a lot about how Grace Lee Boggs often thinks about this idea of dialectics, right? That there's like different sides to things, and how do we find the truth in both sides and meshing them together, and thinking dialectically, as she would talk about it. I think there's something valid about centering movement work, but I think there's also something valid in centering the wellness of each person and their passions and their ability to pursue what they want, that's in their heart, especially if it's coming from a place that is politicized and conscious. And I think also, while the films that Ashley and I are sharing are very like overtly like has a political lens to it, I think also about that, saying of the personal is political. I think whatever we do, whether we just talk about our sense of being, in many ways that is political already. Because for me, as an undocumented queer Filipino person, I feel like my story has experienced a lot of erasure throughout history. The Spanish colonizing the Philippines, erasing, the history of my ancestors, the US coming in with imperialism and kind of like, just westernizing a lot of things, and that erasure is something that we are always grappling with. But by us sharing our own story, I think that in itself is an act of something that's political. And just also want to summon the words of another really brilliant writer, Linda Tuhuai Smith, a Maori scholar based in New Zealand. She has this book called Decolonizing Methodologies, and she talks about the remembering of a people relates not so much to the remembering of an idealized past, but rather a painful past, and more importantly, people's responses to that pain. And I think when we make work that is coming from both a personal and political space, it's a manifestation of us remembering how we're responding to the pain that our communities are experiencing right now, so that hopefully in the future, future generations will have something to look back to in the same way that we're looking back to our ancestors now.
Dang, Set, you just dropping bars today. I'm like, how do I follow this up? But no, everything. I especially appreciate what you said about, organizers um, needing the space to both have, their organizing passion, but also their personal passions. That was so much. That's so much of like what the root of unapologetic is, because organizing is not a monolith. Blackness is not a monolith. And I think a lot of times, the way that everything is portrayed in mainstream media, people on the outside have this idea that everybody is, thinking the same, doing things the same way, upset at the same things. And I think that creates an unnecessary division because people have an idea of what an organizer is, and they're like, oh, that's not me, so I have no place in this space. And that's why it was so important for us to show Janae and Bella like outside of organizing space, because all of that makes up all of that informs the decisions that they are making when they go back to those spaces. So, without spoken word and performance, like spoken word and performance is how Bella became an organizer. She was getting invited to a bunch of these events to just galvanize the crowd. And, while attending them, would meet people and hear from people and be growing in her own political space. And then with Janae, she's constantly thinking about how she can bridge that gap between academia and all of these really high level important concepts that she's learning about Black community, how she can bridge that to her passion for grassroots. So yeah, it was definitely out of a desire to want to show them as like full multifaceted human beings. And I think also what I've learned from organizers is like when you're in it. And I didn't want the moment that was happening in Chicago to pass without like capturing the passion and the energy of the moment. I think a lot of times people wait in social movements until it's done, and then, it's tied with a pretty bow and all the changes have been made to like make these historical pieces. But I think then you lose kind of some of the energy and the fervor and the passion that they were putting behind things. And we really, for me, this was like my contribution to the movement. I hadn't, been in a political organizing space before, but I knew how to pick up a camera and how to tell a story. And so I wanted to contribute to this living canon and archive about, in regards to community organizing, especially before, it became too late. Or like if I tried to make this film now, even, and we're only 5 years away from when we started production, it would be a completely different film. So.
Word, that's right. Yeah, times are changing so quickly. um, even the slogan "defund the police" it made national news, and then it kind of went away.
Right.
So there's still
but even that. Oh, sorry, no. But even that, that they were setting the blueprint for that in 2015. They were talking about defunding the police in 2015. So even
right.
the fact that that became a popularized thought by 2020, it just, yeah, it shows you how quickly things can change. But also, like, there's always a foundation to what to what you're seeing in the popular landscape now. So I think it's just really important that we're constantly thinking about like what we're documenting and saving from our current lives.
Mm-hmm. Word, and where these ideas originated from, too. Like what you're talking about, there's a foundation. Even though they're in the national zeitgeist, there's still kind of this history or trajectory that these buzzwords have come from. So I guess we're just gonna keep this short and sweet. If you all have any final comments or things to say.
No, just go watch Seth's film. I feel like they complimented me, so now I'm like, let me.
Yes.
No, no. I think both films, as we have talked about, are really they're living documents, they're living pieces about a lot of issues that we are still seeing in the current landscape, and with everything that's happening, in terms of even like Black lives in this country, there is a blueprint. And I feel like this is a way for people to learn and start the process of figuring out where they can lean into political organizing, and hopefully don't feel so, overwhelmed, and can look at these very specific stories and feel like they can meet the movement where they're at.
And just adding on, although on a slightly unrelated note, I just want to share, since the film festival is in New Orleans and Louisiana, I just want to also elevate the powerful movement building that organizers in the area are doing. Um, the Cameroonian American Council has been doing a lot of amazing leadership to support Cameroonian asylum seekers that are at risk of being deported and have been experiencing torture by ICE at the Pine Prairie Detention Center. So just want to elevate the work that they're doing also, as well as the Haitian Bridge Alliance. I think being able to also bring these connections around immigration and also the experiences of Black folks is something that these organizations have been doing so powerfully. So just want to encourage folks to support the work of the Cameroonian American Council, the Asian Bridge Alliance, and in New Orleans in particular, Youth Breakout that is supporting campaigns to get the Honduran consulate out of the New Orleans ICE field office. And I think if there are also artists in New Orleans that want to support the amazing leadership of these organizations, please follow them on Instagram, and you can also find ways to donate to them through the campaign that I was supporting with In Plain Sight. Sorry, random PSA, but I just want to uplift the
Oh,
leadership of these
No,
organizations.
drop it. Drop.
love it. Word, thank you both so much. Set with coverage and Ashley with Unapologetic. If you haven't seen the films, you should go see them. And thank you so much for your time, y'all. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Jazz
Jazz.
and
Appreciate your
Ashley.
thoughtful questions.